So Rocksteady showcased their Suicide Squad game once again. They did a 19-minute video. I've talked about some of the things that I got to see at the beginning. I've talked about how I thought the messaging was not so strong regarding the video game. But there is something that I wanted to go ahead and point out here, because in my last video I said, if they want to actually sell this game to those who may on the outside not be convinced, there are opportunities that they must take, or avenues. In fact, in this video, we're going to talk about one of them, because I think this is where the opportunity is for Rocksteady. Now, what is this particular thing? This is basically the DLC. Now, in this 19-minute video, they were just selling the product. I was just watching the devs as they were looking at, the camera reading a script of some kind, you could tell. And, they were just saying the things that their game, had within it. However, they said something about the game is going to be receiving support with huge amounts of DLC later down the road. Now, one thing about gamers is DLC promise is no longer a game seller, because for the most part, many other video games have disappointed in the last few years, especially if you look at, say, some titles that really received a lot of huge coverage and even received a lot of, what, in my opinion anyways, a lot of limelight, like Anthem. Anthem was one of those games where, my goodness, almost all the content creators that talked about that game at the time, they pretty much said that the game was going to be in a good place and all of that stuff. EA flew them out. They were out there doing all that stuff only for the game to come out. And for the most part, people saw that it was actually lacking in content. Even someone like me who plays live service games, I played the Division 1 and the Division 2. At launch, the Division 1 did not have any content at the end game for the most part. It just had the incursion. And the Division 2 did not even have any end game for the most part, except for its dark zones. And even with Ubisoft's massive production rate and capability to punch out their games and their content, including the fact that they had access to multiple studios that helped them to actually deliver content in their game, they still seemed like they were behind when it came to, putting stuff out there for the community, because the community had to, after 2019, wait all the way through 2020 to be able to get their Warlords of New York DLC. Seeing how DLC is not necessarily the easiest thing to just curate and deploy consistently unless you have it already planned out, I don't necessarily think that just saying that there's going to be DLC is something that will convince a lot of gamers. What needs to happen is they need to show this DLC roadmap of some kind and exactly what it's going to contain in order for them to be able to say, this is credibly what we have, and this is credibly what it is that we're going to be adding on top of it. Why? They're asking for full price for this game. You see, as somebody who's made, hundreds of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League videos, in my playlist, I looked recently, there are over 300 videos on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Yes, I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, you've been talking about this game for a minute and you've made a lot of content surrounding it. I can tell you that the mind of gamers surrounding this game is that people would love to actually engage in this particular project, which is insane. People actually are, they have this affinity for the DC fandom and, the Batman games and so on and so forth. However, it's not going to be just so easy these days for anyone just to come out here and just say, oh, all of this sweet songs and, beautiful things, and then everyone is just going to go ahead and believe them. That's not really how it works anymore. I think Rocksteady, probably because of the, time difference between releasing their last game and now, have probably been out of the game and out of the loop, that they can come out with these marketing, tropes and maybe hope that these are going to be the factors that actually pull people in. In reality, this is not necessarily how it is. They can bank and count on their really hardcore fans, that is those who really are in the ecosystem, to go ahead and, represent. But in reality, to be very fair, it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, seem like, many are convinced that they're going to have DLC after the game's launch, because DLC is not something that you just go make. You have to test it. You have to do all of this. And so at the end of the day, what is your DLC going to look like? The one studio that actually delivered on their content, and it was quite surprising, was Warner Bros. Montreal with their Gotham Knights, Heroic Assault 1 and Heroic Assault 2, which was very surprising because they just, people didn't think that they were going to drop those, content pieces, and they were free. and they dropped both of them and they bounced. But Gotham Knights is not a live service game, and I know people might say, well, it seemed like the game was going to be a live service game. That's all conjecture. Maybe if it was or if it wasn't, it's not. I guess at the end of the day, you can just say it that way. You have single player content, you have single player end game content, and you have co-op end game content as well as co-op content for the whole game, which is the packet that they promised. They just basically delivered everything that they said they would. Now, in the case of a live service game, on the other hand, it's very different because it's an open-ended game that's, is going to supposedly designed for receiving support. But there are so many factors that you have to put into place, which is they have to test all these systems. They have to make sure that these things are actually useful in order for them to be able to confirm that they can drop this content, at any given time. So, in my opinion, if Rocksteady is coming out with another conversation about endgame or DLC, I'm hoping that they're going to be as detailed as possible and realistic as possible and ensure that they are very, very transparent as to how they want to approach the support of this game down the road. I mean, I know that there might be, potential spoilers, but they need to pretty much address it because there are people asking some questions. So how are these characters going to be represented? How are we going to see them in the game? Is it a thing where someone like, if they add Killer Frost to the game, is she going to be holding a gun? People are asking these questions because it's a shooter. So how do they want to implement this? How do they want to tie it into the story? Is the DLC going to have story? Is it going to be just a bunch of missions where we go do raids or whatever it is? How are the developers and the program planners trying to get this game out there for everybody? So, in my opinion, I think if they go for this, they're really, really going to see some, in my opinion, anyways, they're going to see some good responses at the end of the day because it's not an easy game to put forward. Stefan Hill's no longer there. His amicable face is no longer in front of this game because if Stefan Hill's telling you something, you can be like, well, it's Stefan, darn. But now it's like a whole bunch of new folks, so their work is cut out for them. But it is what it is. This is one of those things where they're going to learn, exactly how they need to move from here on. And possibly maybe, look forward to working on a Superman game. Maybe that will give a goodwill, in my opinion anyways. It'll give a goodwill laying out the groundwork and people can look favorably on Suicide Squad more than they already are currently. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.